Today, you will know the complete story of the first book of Samuel in a way you may have never seen, without filters and without delay. Stay until the end, and I am sure that the story of this powerful book will change something in your life. In the mountainous region of Ephraim lived a man named Elkanah, son of Jeroham, a pious Levite of respectable lineage, who went up every year to Shiloh to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of hosts. His heart was tied to tradition, but his house was marked by a silent tension. Elkanah had two wives, Peninnah and Hannah. Peninnah was fertile, mother of sons and daughters. Hannah, however, was barren, and Hannah's closed womb became a stage for deep pain. Peninnah, instead of compassion, threw words like arrows at every trip to Shiloh, at every sacrifice offered, at every portion given by Elkanah to his family. Peninnah mocked. She cruelly provoked Hannah for her sterility, as if the absence of children were a personal failure, an unforgivable dishonor. But Elkanah loved Hannah. He always gave her a double portion of the sacrifice. He tried to comfort her with words. "Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? Am I not better to you than 10 sons?" His affection, however, did not silence the emptiness that echoed within her. In one of those years, Hannah stood up after eating and drinking in Shiloh. It was the moment when the priest Eli was sitting by the entrance of the temple of the Lord. Hannah, deeply embittered, prayed. Her words were not audible, but her lips trembled. Tears flowed freely. It was a prayer made in silence, but one that broke the heavens. She made a vow to the Lord. "Lord of hosts, if you look upon the affliction of your servant, if you remember me and give me a man-child, I will dedicate him to you for all the days of his life. Upon his head no razor will pass." Eli observed, thought she was drunk, and rebuked her harshly. "How long will you be drunk? Put away your wine." But Hannah answered with sincerity, "No, my lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have not drunk wine or strong drink, but I have poured out my soul before the Lord." Then blessed her. "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant you the petition you have made." Hannah returned home. Her face was no longer the same. Sadness had given way to hope. In the appointed time, God remembered Hannah. She conceived and gave birth to a son. She called him Samuel because she said, "From the Lord I asked him." When Elkanah went up again to Shiloh to offer the annual sacrifice, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, "I will wait until the boy is weaned. Then I will take him to appear before the Lord, and there he will stay forever." Elkanah agreed. When the boy was weaned, Hannah took him to the house of the Lord with an offering of sacrifice, and there, before the priest Eli, she declared, "For this boy I prayed, and the Lord heard my petition. Therefore I also give him to the Lord for all the days that he lives." And there, before the altar, Hannah worshipped the Lord. The boy Samuel, fruit of the silent prayer of an afflicted woman, would be raised in the temple, set apart for God from childhood, and thus begins the journey of the one who would be one of the greatest prophets in the history of Israel. Morning was born with praise on Hannah's lips. The same woman who had once poured out her soul in weeping now stood up with gratitude. Her words were no longer silent whispers in the temple, but songs full of power. Hannah prayed, not asking, but exalting. "My heart exults in the Lord. My strength is exalted in the Lord. My mouth is widened over my enemies, because I rejoice in your salvation." Her words were a prophecy. She spoke of the sovereignty of God, who exalts the humble and abates the proud, who fills the hungry and impoverishes those who before had plenty, who raises the poor from the dust and makes them sit among princes. Hannah saw with the eyes of faith. The God who heard her was not just a personal help, but the eternal King who would judge all the earth. After this praise, Elkanah returned to his house in Ramah and left Samuel in the temple under the care of the priest Eli. The boy was still small, but he already ministered before the Lord. Dressed in a simple linen ephod, every year, Hannah made him a new tunic and took it when she went up with Elkanah to offer the annual sacrifice. It was a surrender, but also a gesture of love. The mother who had consecrated her son now accompanied him in prayer and silent care, and the Lord rewarded her faithfulness. Hannah had 3 more sons and 2 daughters. The once barren woman now became a symbol of fertility and blessing. And Samuel grew before the Lord in stature, in wisdom, in favor with God and with men. But not everything in Shiloh was light. Inside the same sanctuary where Samuel flourished, there was darkness. The sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, also served as priests. But they were corrupt men. They took for themselves the best parts of the sacrifices, disrespected the law, and despised the Lord. More than that, they committed immorality inside the very house of God, profaning the holy with their shameful acts. Eli, already elderly, knew of everything. He tried to correct them. "Why do you do such things? I do not hear good news about you. If a man sins against another, the judges will judge him. But if he sins against the Lord, who will intercede for him?" But his sons did not listen. Their hearts were hardened, and the divine sentence was already on its way. A man of God came to Eli with a message from heaven, a judgment declared, irrefutable. God reminded Eli of the privilege he had granted to his house, the priesthood, the altar, the sacrifices. But the Lord now declared, "You honor your sons more than me, to fatten yourselves on the offerings of my people. Behold, I will take from your house the priesthood. None of yours will live to old age. Your eyes will see the affliction of the house of Israel, and I will give you a sign. Your 2 sons will die on the same day." But not everything would end in judgment. In the midst of the condemnation, a promise arose. "I will raise up for myself a faithful priest, who will do according to what is in my heart and in my soul. I will establish for him a lasting house. He will serve before my anointed forever." Samuel grew, and with him grew the hope of a new time. Night fell over Shiloh like a thick mantle of silence. It was a time when visions were rare and the word of the Lord scarce. The people walked, but the prophetic voice that guided Israel seemed asleep. The priest Eli, now blind and elderly, rested in his place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, flickering in the sanctuary. And there, by the ark of God, slept the boy Samuel, still a youth, but already known in the temple as a servant of the Lord. Raised from a small child in the presence of God, he ministered beside Eli with obedience and zeal. But until that moment, Samuel did not yet know the Lord intimately. He had never heard his voice. He had not yet experienced the weight and glory of a divine calling. Then, something happened. In the middle of the night, a voice broke the silence. "Samuel." The boy got up in a hurry, ran to Eli. "Here I am, for you called me." But Eli, sleepy, answered, "I did not call you, my son. Go back to lie down." Young Samuel returned to his bed. Again, the voice echoed, Samuel. Once more the youth ran to the old priest. Here I am, for you called me. But Eli denied. I did not call you, my son. Go and lie down. The third time was repeated, and Samuel got up again and ran to Eli. It was then that the elder, with the experience of someone who had heard that voice before, realized it was not a mistake. It was the Lord himself calling the boy. Eli instructed, "Go and lie down. If he calls you again, you will say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" Samuel returned, lay down, waited, and the Lord came. He presented himself as before, but now with a glorious intimacy. "Samuel, Samuel." Chitan and the boy answered with an open heart, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." There, God broke the silence of a generation. Heaven bowed to earth and revealed his judgment to a boy. Samuel heard harsh but holy words. God revealed that he would fulfill everything he had announced against the house of Eli, that there would be no atonement for the sins of his sons. For Eli knew it and did not rebuke them firmly. The weight of the priesthood had been despised, and the judgment was certain. Samuel remained awake until morning. When the light dawned, he feared telling the vision to Eli, but the priest called him. "Samuel, my son." "Here I am." "What was it that the Lord told you?" "Do not hide anything from me. May God punish you severely if you hide any word from me." Then Samuel told everything, with reverence and faithfulness. He revealed to the priest every detail of the divine sentence, and Eli, submissive, answered, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good in his eyes." From that day on, everything changed. The Lord was with Samuel, and none of his words fell to the ground. From Dan to Beersheba, all Israel knew a new prophet had arisen. Samuel was now recognized as the spokesperson of God in Israel. The silence was broken. The word of the Lord echoed again in Shiloh, and the boy who had heard the voice in the dark would become the man who would guide the light over the nation. While the word of God revealed itself in Shiloh, the borders of the nation were threatened. An old enemy, the Philistines, rose again with strength and cruelty. Israel went out to battle against them. The combat field was formed near Ebenezer, and the Philistines camped in Aphek. When the dust of the war settled in that first confrontation, 4,000 Israelites lay dead. A devastating blow. The people were perplexed. Why did the Lord strike us today before the Philistines? Seeking a solution, the elders of the people made a bold and desperate decision. Bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord that is in Shiloh, so that it may come among us and save us from the hands of our enemies. It was as if they could invoke the power of God like an amulet. The ark, symbol of the divine presence, was taken from the tabernacle and taken to the battlefield. Hophni and Phinehas, the sons of Eli, came along with it. Those same corrupt priests now carried the most sacred object of the faith of Israel. When the ark entered the camp, a cry of triumph shook the ground. The people of Israel shouted with strength, but on the other side, the Philistines heard the shout and were filled with fear. A god came to their camp. Woe to us! Never before has such a thing happened. Who will deliver us from the hands of these powerful gods? But instead of retreating, the Philistines strengthened themselves in fear. Be men and act manfully, O Philistines, so that you do not become servants of the Hebrews. And the war reignited. What came next was a disaster. Israel was defeated, not in thousands, but in tens of thousands. 30,000 men fell on that day. The Ark of God was taken, the symbol of the covenant, the throne of glory, the center of the faith of Israel, captured. Hophni and Phinehas, the sons of Eli, were killed. The tragedy was total. A Benjamite man ran from the battlefield to Shiloh. His clothes were torn, dust on his head. He arrived in the city, and the cry rose like the sound of collective lament. Eli was sitting at the entrance of the city, anxious. His heart trembled, not for his sons, but for the Ark of God. The messenger told everything. Israel fled before the Philistines. Many fell. Thy sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the Ark of God was taken. Upon hearing about the Ark, Eli fell from the chair backwards. His fragile body did not resist. The priest of Israel, judge for 40 years, died with a broken neck. He was 98 years old. The wife of Phinehas, pregnant, went into labor upon hearing the news. She gave birth to a son, but her strength faded before dying. She named the boy Ichabod. The glory has departed because the Ark of God had been taken, because her father-in-law and her husband were dead. And thus, with the birth of a child and the death of a people, the name was sealed as an eternal lament. The glory of Israel was withdrawn. The Philistines triumphed in the field. The Ark of the Covenant of Israel, the invisible throne of the Almighty God, was now in their hands. The glory that had led Israel from the desert had been taken as a war trophy. But the Philistines were about to discover that they had not captured just a symbol. They had touched the sacred. The Ark was taken from Ebenezer to Ashdod, one of the 5 main cities of the Philistines, with pride and arrogance. They placed the Ark in the temple of Dagon, the national god, positioning it beside the great statue of the idol. For them, it was like exhibiting the defeat of Israel before the supposed supremacy of Dagon. But at dawn, the illusion fell literally. When the priests and the inhabitants of Ashdod entered the temple, they found Dagon fallen on his face before the Ark of the Lord, a god prostrate before another. Frightened, they lifted the statue and placed it back in its place. Perhaps they thought it was an accident. But the next morning, the astonishment turned into terror. Dagon was again prostrate, this time with his hands and head cut off, cast upon the threshold of the temple. Only the trunk remained. The message was clear. The Lord does not share his glory with anyone. Fear spread through Ashdod. But that was just the beginning. The hand of the Lord weighed upon the men of that city. Tumors began to arise. The affliction spread like a plague. Death, pain, despair. The inhabitants were anguished, realizing that the presence of the Ark, which they thought to be a victory, was, in truth, judgment. The Ark of the God of Israel cannot stay with us. His hand is hard upon us and upon Dagon, our God. They gathered the princes of the Philistines and decided to move the Ark to another city, Gath. But the judgment followed them. As soon as the Ark arrived in Gath, the same plague struck its inhabitants. Tumors arose among great and small. The people shouted. Gath has panicked. And once again, the leaders made a desperate decision to send the Ark to Ekron. But when it arrived in Ekron, the people did not even allow the Ark to be unloaded. The fear had already arrived before it. They brought the Ark of the God of Israel to kill us and our people. A cry took over the city. Death and plague advanced like a divine shadow. Tumors covered the bodies. The cry of the dying rose to the heavens. The presence that should be worshipped was being rejected with horror. The Ark that the Philistines took as a conquest had become a curse. Instead of honor, destruction Instead of power, judgment. Behind the apparent victory was a God who does not let himself be mocked. And the Philistines began to understand. The ark was not just an object of Israel, it was the throne of the living God. The ark of the Lord remained 7 long months among the Philistines. 7 months of terror, plagues and tumors. The victory had turned into a curse. The 5 main cities were in agony. It was no longer a war against Israel. It was against the God of Israel himself. Finally, the Philistines gathered, called their priests and diviners. What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? How shall we return it to its place? The religious leaders fearfully advised, do not send it back empty. Make an offering for guilt so that the plague may cease. Perhaps thus his hand will be relieved. What offering shall we make? They answered, 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats, according to the number of the princes of the Philistines, for the plague struck everyone. Make images of your tumors and of the rats that ravage the land, and give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps he will relieve his hand from you, from your gods and from your land. And they continued with fear. Why would you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh did? Did they not see what the Lord did to them until they let them go? Then they schemed a plan. They would build a new cart, never used, pulled by 2 cows that had recently calved, but that had never been placed under a yoke. They would separate the calves from the mothers to test if the direction taken would indeed be led by a divine hand. If the cows went straight to Beth Shemesh, they would know that the Lord had caused all that calamity. Otherwise, it would be chance. The ark was placed upon the cart. Beside it, a chest with 5 gold tumors and 5 gold rats, images of the judgment they had suffered. The cows were released, and, to everyone's astonishment, they went straight along the road to Beth Shemesh, lowing, but without deviating, neither to the right nor to the left. The princes of the Philistines followed to the border as witnesses of the impossible. The people of Beth Shemesh were in the field harvesting wheat. When they saw the ark in the distance, they stopped. A cry of joy broke the silence. The glory of the Lord returned to Israel. The cows stopped beside a large stone. The people offered sacrifices upon it. Joy and reverence filled the environment. The Levites took down the ark and the chest of offerings, burned the wood of the cart, and sacrificed the cows to the Lord as a burnt offering. It was a day of holy celebration, but reverence soon gave way to imprudence. Some men of Beth Shemesh dared to look inside the ark of the Lord. That which was holy, inviolable, was treated with levity. The judgment fell upon them. 70 men were killed for their irreverence. Mourning replaced the joy. Who can stand before the Lord, this holy God, and to whom will he go up from us? Fear returned. The people sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, saying, "The Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come and take it for yourselves." The ark had returned, but Israel began to learn an eternal lesson. The presence of God is not an object that is controlled, but a fire that is honored with fear and holiness. The ark of the Lord was taken to Kiriath Jearim, where it found shelter in the house of Abinadab, situated on a hill. There it was guarded with zeal by Eliezer, consecrated for this purpose. For 20 years, the ark remained there distant from the tabernacle, but not forgotten. During this time, Israel felt its absence deeply. The people groaned. The heart of the nation began to turn again to the Lord. It was then that Samuel, already recognized as a prophet and judge, stood before the people with a firm voice, but full of compassion. "If it is with all your heart that you return to the Lord, put away the strange gods and the Asherah poles from among you. Prepare your heart for the Lord, and serve only him. Then he will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines." The response was immediate. Israel abandoned Baal, rejected Asherah, destroyed the idols, began a true return to the living God. A repentance that was not just of words, but of action. Samuel convened a great assembly in Mizpah. All the people gathered there, fasted, and confessed their sins. They poured water before the Lord, a symbol of total surrender, as one who empties himself before the presence of God. "We have sinned against the Lord," they said. And Samuel judged Israel there, guiding them not with a sword, but with truth, intercession, and justice. But the purification of the people awakened the wrath of the enemies. The Philistines, upon learning that Israel was gathered, marched against them. It was a perfect moment for an attack. Israel unarmed, vulnerable, focused on worship. Fear spread. "Samuel, do not cease to cry to the Lord, our God, for us," they pleaded, "so that he may deliver us from the hands of the Philistines." And Samuel did not retreat. He took a lamb and offered it whole as a burnt offering to the Lord. While the fire rose to heaven, his words also rose in prayer. And at that exact moment, the heaven answered. The Lord thundered with great thunderings upon the Philistines. A supernatural confusion took them. The enemy army was defeated before Israel. The men of Israel, renewed in faith, pursued the Philistines to below Bethkar and struck them hard. It was a divine turnaround. Then Samuel took a stone and raised it between Mizpah and Shean. He called it Ebenezer, which means, "Hitherto the Lord has helped us." That marker was not just a memorial of the victory, but of the faithfulness of God to a repentant people. From that day on, the Philistines did not return to invade Israel. The hand of the Lord was against them for all the days of Samuel. The cities that had been taken were returned, and peace returned between Israel and the Amorites. And Samuel continued to judge Israel all the days of his life. Year after year he traversed Bethel, Gilgal, and Mizpah, judging the people with justice. And then he returned to Ramah, where he kept his house. And there also he raised an altar to the Lord. It was a time of restoration, a time of return. And Samuel, a man set apart from the womb, led the nation not with weapons, but with the word and with a heart turned to God. Time passed. The leadership of Samuel had restored the faith in Israel and brought peace to the land. But the years left their marks. Samuel grew old, and as was the tradition among the judges, he appointed his sons as leaders over Israel, in the hope of maintaining justice and faithfulness to the law of the Lord. He placed Joel and Abijah as judges in Beersheba, in the far south. But unlike their father, they did not walk in the ways of Samuel. Their eyes coveted dishonest gains, perverted justice, accepted bribes. Corruption returned to stain the corridors of justice. The people noticed, and the respect they had for Samuel was not enough to ignore the conduct of his sons. The elders of Israel, representatives of the tribes, went up together to Ramah, where Samuel lived. There, before the old judge, they presented an unexpected request loaded with rejection. "You are already old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Appoint for us, then, a king over us, to judge us as all the nations have." Samuel heard in silence, but his heart was stirred. That wounded his soul. The people wanted a king, like the nations around. They rejected the theocratic model, the direct government of God, through judges and prophets. The request was not just for leadership, it was for independence from the divine will. Samuel, anguished, brought the matter to the Lord in prayer, And the Lord answered with clarity. Hear the voice of the people in everything they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but me, so that I do not reign over them, according to all that they have done since the day I brought them out of Egypt until today. They have forsaken me, served other gods, so they do also with you. It was an open wound, a rebellion that repeated itself generation after generation. But God commanded, heed their voice, however warn them solemnly, and show them what will be the right of the king who is to reign over them. That Samuel called the people and, with a firm and prophetic voice, spoke of the consequences of what they were asking. This will be the right of the king who reigns over you. He will take your sons and place them in his chariots and horses. Some will be soldiers, others laborers of his fields, harvesters of his vineyards, makers of his weapons. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. He will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and give them to his servants. He will take the tithes of your fields, of your harvests, of your flocks, and you will be his servants. Then you will cry out because of your king, but the Lord will not hear you on that day. The warning was clear. The future would be heavy. Human government would bring centralized power, exploitation, control, but the people did not want to hear. We do not want a king over us. We want to be like all the nations. Let him govern us. Go out before us and fight our battles. And Samuel returned to hear the Lord, and the Lord reaffirmed, heed their voice, give them a king. Then Samuel dismissed the men of Israel and sent each one to return to his city. But in the silence of that farewell, a cycle was closing. Israel had chosen to trade the direct leadership of God for a human monarchy, and, although the Lord would allow it, this choice would deeply mark the history of the nation. The time of the judges was coming to an end, and the time of the kings was about to begin. In the middle of the land of Benjamin lived a man named Kish, of the lineage of Aphiah, a respected Benjamite, a man of position, but he was not the center of the story. His son Saul was the one who drew attention. Saul was tall, very tall, from the shoulders up. No one in Israel compared to him. Strong, young, handsome, a man who, to human eyes, seemed to have been born to lead. One day, the donkeys of Kish were lost, and he sent Saul, together with a servant, to go in search of the animals. What seemed like a simple task of an obedient son would turn into a divine journey. They passed through the mountainous region of Ephraim, through the lands of Shalisha, through Shalem, and then through Benjamin. But nothing of the donkeys. When they reached the land of Zuph, Saul thought of returning. We have walked much. My father will stop worrying about the donkeys and will start worrying about us. But the servant had an idea. In this city, there is a very respected man of God. Everything he says happens. Let us go to him. Perhaps he will tell us where to go. He spoke of Samuel. Saul hesitated. He did not have a gift to bring, but the servant offered a silver coin. And so the two went towards the city where the prophet was. As they went up the path, they met young women who were going to draw water. Is the seer in the city? Yes, they said. He arrived today. There is a sacrifice on the altar. If you run, you will still find him before he goes up to bless the sacrifice. Chai. And they went up. But what Saul did not know was that on the previous night, God had already spoken with Samuel. Tomorrow, at this same hour, I will send to you a man from the land of Benjamin. You will anoint him as prince over my people, Israel. He will deliver the people from the hand of the Philistines. I have looked upon my people. Their cry has reached me. As soon as Samuel spotted Saul, the Lord confirmed, "This is the man." Saul approached the prophet without knowing who he was. "Please, can you tell me where the seer's house is?" Samuel smiled. "I am the seer. Go up with me to the high place. Today you will eat with me. Tomorrow, in the morning, I will let you go and will reveal to you everything that is in your heart. And as for the donkeys that were lost 3 days ago, do not worry. They have already been found. And for whom is reserved everything that is desirable in Israel? Is it not for you and for all the house of your father?" Saul was astonished. "Am I not a Benjamite, the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and my family is not the smallest within Benjamin?" But what was in progress was not a human plan. Samuel took Saul and his servant to the banquet, gave them a place of honor among the guests, about 30 men. He set aside for Saul the reserved portion, the thigh, a symbol of prestige, and said, "Behold what was reserved for you, eat." That night, Saul slept in the prophet's house, and at dawn, when the light touched the hills of Ramah, Samuel called, "Get up so that I may send you." When they arrived at the exit of the city, Samuel asked that the servant go on ahead, and then, alone with Saul, he said, "Stop now, so that I may make you hear the word of God." The destiny of Israel was about to change. The young Benjamite, who went in search of donkeys, would at that moment be set apart for the throne. The sun had barely dawned on the horizon when Samuel, with firm eyes and anointed hands, took a flask of oil. He approached Saul, the young man who the day before only looked for donkeys, and sealed his destiny. He poured the oil upon his head, a sacred symbol of the anointing, and kissed him. "Has not the Lord anointed you as prince over his inheritance? When you depart from me today, 3 signs will be given to you, so that you know that God is with you." Samuel then described with prophetic precision what would happen. First, upon arriving by Rachel's tomb near Zelzah, in the land of Benjamin, you will find 2 men. They will tell you, "The donkeys have been found. Your father is distressed, asking, 'What will become of my son?'" Second, upon arriving at the oak of Tabor, 3 men will go up to offer sacrifices at Bethel. One will bring 3 kids, another 3 loaves, and the third a skin of wine. They will greet you and give you 2 loaves. Accept them. And finally, upon arriving at Gibeah of God, where there is a Philistine garrison, you will find a group of prophets coming down from the high place with psalteries, drums, flutes, and harps. They will prophesy, and the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you with power. You also will prophesy, and you will become another man. When these signs happen, do what is in your hand, for God is with you. Then go down to Gilgal. 7 days you will wait until I come to offer sacrifices and show you what you must do." Saul departed, and everything happened exactly as Samuel had said. The heart of Saul was transformed. The Spirit of God began to act in a supernatural way upon him, and upon meeting the prophets, Saul was taken by a spiritual ecstasy. He prophesied among them. The people were stunned. What happened to the son of Kish? Is he also among the prophets? The saying spread, "Is Saul among the prophets?" But when the spiritual moment passed, Saul returned home. His uncle, curious, questioned him. "Where were you?" "We went to look for the donkeys, and upon not finding them, we went to consult Samuel." "Shti, and what did Samuel tell you?" Saul answered with caution. He said that the donkeys had already been found, but did not tell anything about the anointing. He kept the secret. The time had not yet come. Later, Samuel convened all the people in Mizpah, a national gathering. It was the solemn moment to present the chosen one of the Lord, tribe by tribe, clan by clan, man by man, until the lot fell upon the tribe of Benjamin, then upon the family of Matri, and finally upon Saul, son of Kish. But when the name was called, Saul was not among them. They looked for him. They did not find him and sought the Lord again. "Has the man come here?" And the Lord answered, "Behold, he is hidden among the baggage." They brought him, and when Saul stood before the people, everyone admired. He was taller than any other, imposing, strong, with the appearance of a king. Then Samuel said to the people, "Do you see whom the Lord has chosen? In all the people there is none like him." And all the people shouted, "Long live the king!" Samuel declared before the people the rights of the kingdom, wrote everything in a book, and placed it before the Lord. Then everyone returned to their house, and Saul also returned to Gibeah, accompanied by men of valor whose hearts God had touched. But not everyone bowed. Some men despised Saul, mocked, asked, "How can this one save us?" They did not bring gifts. They did not honor him. But Saul remained silent. The man who had been anointed in secret, confirmed by signs and exalted in public, now needed to learn to wait. The throne awaited him. But first, the war. Not all the enemies of Israel were silent. To the east of the Jordan, the Ammonites, ancient descendants of Lot, prepared an offensive against the people of God, and at their head was a cruel man, Nahash, king of the Ammonites. He advanced against the Israelite city of Jabesh-Gilead, surrounding it with clear intentions, destruction and humiliation. The men of the city, fearing death, sought an exit. "Make a covenant with us, and we will serve you," they said to Nahash. But the enemy king did not want only servants. He wanted scorn. His heart was guided by contempt. "I will make a covenant with you on one condition, that I gouge out the right eye of everyone. Thus I will shame all Israel." The proposal fell like poison among the inhabitants of Jabesh. Despair, shame. They asked for time. "Grant us 7 days so that we may send messengers throughout the territory of Israel. If no one comes to our rescue, we will surrender to you." Nahash, sure of his victory, agreed. The humiliation would be even greater if the entire people saw the weakness of Jabesh. The messengers departed, crossed hills and valleys until they reached Gibeah, where Saul, recently anointed, still led a simple life in the field. The news spread through the city like fire in dry straw. The people wept with a loud voice. It was then that Saul was returning from the field, leading his oxen, and asked, "What is with the people that they are weeping?" They told him what the men of Jabesh had said, and at that instant, something supernatural took hold of Saul. The Spirit of God took possession of him with power. His fury was holy. His indignation was just. The time to hide had ended. The king, until then silent, now stood up with authority, took a yoke of oxen, cut them into pieces, and sent them throughout the territory of Israel by means of messengers, saying, "So will it be done with the oxen of everyone who does not come out after Saul and Samuel." The fear of the Lord fell upon the people, from north to south. Men stood up. Saul gathered the army in Bezek. There were 300,000 men of Israel and 30,000 of Judah, the largest mobilization since the days of the judges. The messengers were sent back to Jabesh. tomorrow. At the heating of the sun, you will have deliverance." Hope was rekindled, and the men of Jabesh with strategy said to Nahash, "You will do with us what seems good in your eyes." But it was a trap. The next morning, Saul divided his army into 3 companies and attacked by surprise the camp of the Ammonites during the morning watch. The massacre was total. The survivors fled in confusion, in such a way that not 2 of them remained together. Israel had been delivered, and the people now saw with clarity that God was with Saul. Then, some remembered those who had despised the new king weeks before. Where are those who said, "Will Saul reign over us? Bring us these men, and we will kill them"? But Saul, now confirmed by the people and by the victory, answered with nobility, "Today no one will be killed, because the Lord has wrought a great deliverance in Israel." And Samuel said to the people, "Come, let us go up to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there." There, before the altar, Saul was again proclaimed king before the Lord. They offered peace offerings, and there was great joy in Israel. The man who had begun timid, hidden among the baggage, now reigned with courage, humility, and power. Israel was united, and the Lord had shown that the true strength of a king is in his obedience to the God who raised him. The people were gathered in Gilgal. The atmosphere was of celebration. Saul had been confirmed as king, and Israel was united, invigorated after the victory against the Ammonites. But before moving forward, Samuel, now old, white hair, firm look, stands before the crowd. The moment was not just for celebration, but also of transition. It was time to settle accounts with history. With a solemn voice, Samuel addressed everyone. "Behold, I have heeded your voice in everything you asked me, and I have established over you a king. And now, behold the king who goes before you. I, already old and gray-haired, have walked before you from my youth until this day." The old prophet looked into the eyes of the people. There was no arrogance in his speech, only truth. "Here I am. Testify against me, before the Lord and before his anointed. From whom have I taken an ox? From whom a donkey? Whom have I defrauded? Whom have I oppressed? From whom have I accepted a bribe to cover my eyes with it? And I will restore it to you." The people answered with firmness, "You have never defrauded us, nor oppressed us, nor taken anything from the hand of anyone." Samuel made them confirm before God, "The Lord is witness against you this day, and also his anointed is witness that you have found nothing in my hands." He is witness," said the people. Then Samuel took a step further. The moment was sacred. He began to recite the history of Israel, not as a narrative of national glory, but as a record of divine faithfulness and repeated human infidelity. The Lord was the one who chose Moses and Aaron and brought you out of the land of Egypt, when your fathers forgot the Lord. He gave them into the hands of the enemies, Sisera, the Philistines, the king of Moab. But when they cried to the Lord and repented, he raised judges, Jerubbaal, Bedan, Jephthah, Samuel, and delivered them, whom Samuel then touched the sensitive point. However, when you saw that Nahash, king of the sons of Ammon, was coming against you, you said to me, "No, but a king must reign over us, even though the Lord your God was your king. Now, here is the king you chose, that you asked for. Behold, God has granted it. If you fear the Lord, serve him, hear his voice, and are not rebellious, both you and your king will be blessed. But if you disobey, the hand of the Lord will be against you, as it was against your fathers." And then Samuel did something surprising. Now I will present before you a sign from heaven, so that you know how great is the wickedness that you have done in asking for a king. It was the time of the wheat harvest, clear sky, dry climate. But Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the sky darkened. Thunders and rains fell in a supernatural way. The earth trembled. The people also. Fear took hold of everyone. Pray for your servants to the Lord, your God, so that we do not die. Because in addition to all our sins, we have added this asking for ourselves a king. But Samuel, with pastoral compassion, answered, "Do not fear. You have done all this evil, yes, but now do not turn away from the Lord. Serve him with all your heart. Do not turn back, following vain things that profit nothing and cannot deliver, because they are vain." And he declared one of the sweetest truths of the covenant. The Lord will not forsake his people for the sake of his great name, because it pleased the Lord to make you his people. And he concluded, "As for me, far be it from me to sin against the Lord in ceasing to pray for you. Instead, I will teach you the good and right way. Fear the Lord. Serve him faithfully. Consider the great deeds that he has done for you. But if you persevere in wickedness, you will perish, both you and your king." Samuel closed his speech like a father who exhorts, loves, and warns. There was no resentment. There was zeal. The monarchy had begun, yes, but the sovereignty was still God's. Saul was 40 years old when he began to reign, and 2 years later, he initiated his first great military movement. He gathered 3,000 men of Israel. 2,000 stayed with him in Michmash and in the mountains of Bethel. The other 1,000 stayed with his son Jonathan, a brave and determined youth in Gibeah of Benjamin. And it was Jonathan who made the first bold move. He attacked the garrison of the Philistines in Geba, a quick, accurate blow, but which had enormous consequences. Upon learning of the offensive, the Philistines were enraged. Israel, a small and weakened people, had dared to challenge the most feared military empire in the region. Saul ordered the trumpet to be blown throughout the territory. "Hear the people. Saul struck the garrison of the Philistines. Now Israel has become odious among the Philistines." But with courage came dread. The Philistines summoned their forces. It was like a devastating swarm. They came with 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen and soldiers as numerous as the sand of the seashore. They camped in Michmash, to the east of Beth Aven, ready to crush Israel. The people of God trembled. The Israelites saw that they were in great straits, cornered. Men fled to caves, holes, rocks, tombs, and cisterns. Some even crossed the Jordan, fleeing to Gad and Gilead. Saul's army was dwindling. Fear was greater than faith. Meanwhile, Saul waited in Gilgal. The prophet Samuel had said that he should wait 7 days until he came to offer the sacrifice. It was a clear instruction. The king should trust in God's time. But the days passed and Samuel did not appear. The people began to desert. Soldiers went away, one by one, like leaves carried by the wind. Then Saul, pressured, impatient, and taken by fear, made a decision that was not his to make. "Bring me here the burnt offering and the peace offerings." And he himself offered the sacrifice. He barely finished presenting the offering. Samuel arrived. The prophet saw the altar still smoking. The smell of the sacrifice filled the air. Saul's expression was one of justification, not of repentance. "What have you done?" asked Samuel, and Saul began to explain. "Because I saw that the people were scattering from me, and you did not come in the appointed days." and the Philistines were already gathering in Michmash. I said, "Now they will descend against me, and I have not yet sought the favor of the Lord." Therefore I forced myself and offered the burnt offering. But Samuel did not accept the excuse. "You have acted foolishly. You have not kept the commandment that the Lord, your God, commanded you, because now the Lord would have confirmed your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom will not subsist. The Lord sought for himself a man according to his heart. To him the Lord commanded that he be prince over his people, inasmuch as you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." It was a devastating blow. Saul would still reign, but it would not be eternal. The royal lineage would be broken. His throne would not pass on. Samuel departed from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin. Saul counted his remaining men, only 600 soldiers. From an army of thousands, there was a handful of warriors. Meanwhile, the Philistines organized for the attack. They divided their armies into 3 companies to plunder Israel. And to make matters worse, Israel was unarmed. The Philistines had forbidden blacksmiths in Israel, so that the people would not have spears or swords. Only Saul and Jonathan possessed weapons of war. The people of God were under threat, poorly equipped, led by a king who had acted on impulse. The army was small, the fear was great, and the war was at the door. While Saul remained paralyzed, Jonathan, his son, made a bold and solitary decision without telling his father. Jonathan called his armor-bearer and said, "Let us go to the garrison of the Philistines on the other side." They went up towards the enemy garrison, through between 2 craggy rocks, one called Bozez and the other Sena. And there, in the midst of the uncertainty, Jonathan declared his faith. "Nothing hinders the Lord from delivering, with many or with few. Let us go to them. If they say, 'Wait until we come to you,' we will stay. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' we will go up, because that will be a sign that the Lord has delivered them into our hands." The sign came. The Philistines mocked, "Come up here. Show us what you know how to do." It was all Jonathan needed to hear. He climbed with his hands and feet with the armor-bearer behind. And when they reached the top, they caused the impossible. Jonathan struck down 20 men alone in a small combat area, and the armor-bearer, without hesitating, followed him in victory. Suddenly, terror spread in the Philistine camp. A supernatural panic fell upon the soldiers. The earth trembled. There was confusion. The enemies began to turn against each other. It was God himself warring for Israel. From afar, Saul's sentinels saw the movement. "The camp is breaking up," Saul ordered to count the people. Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. When he realized what had happened, Saul hurried to gather his men for combat. Even the Israelites who had deserted and those who were hiding in the mountains returned for the battle. Israel attacked. The Philistines fled in all directions. The Hebrew army pursued them from Michmash to Aijalon. It was a resounding victory, but there was a problem. An unthinking order from Saul before the battle. Saul had cast an oath upon the army. "Cursed be the man who eats bread until the evening, until I take vengeance on my enemies." The hungry people fought without strength. Even when they reached a forest where honey dripped from the combs, no one dared to touch it, except Jonathan, who did not know of the curse. He dipped the tip of the rod in the honey, tasted it, and his eyes lit up. The energy returned to his body. But the soldiers warned him. "Your father adjured the people, saying, 'Cursed is he who eats today.'" Jonathan answered with wisdom and criticism, "My father troubles the land. See how my eyes have brightened upon tasting a little honey. How much better if the people had freely eaten of the enemy's spoil. At nightfall, the people, exhausted and hungry, threw themselves upon the spoils. They took sheep, oxen, calves, and ate them with blood, violating the law of the Lord. Saul was informed and built an altar, calling the priests. He wanted to consult God to know if he should continue pursuing the Philistines at night. But the Lord did not answer. Then Saul knew that there was sin in the middle of the camp. He swore by God that even if it were his son, Jonathan the culprit, he would die. They cast lots, and the lot fell upon Jonathan. Saul asked, "What have you done?" And Jonathan told what he had done, assuming responsibility. "In effect, I tasted a little honey with the tip of the staff that I had in my hand. Here I am. I will die." But the people stood up in his defense. Would Jonathan die? He who brought such deliverance to Israel? Far be it from us such a thing. And thus the people delivered Jonathan from death. Saul suspended the pursuit. The Philistines escaped and Israel returned home. The following years were marked by continuous war. Saul fought against all his enemies: Moab, Ammon, Edom, the kings of Zobah, the Philistines. Whenever he saw a strong and brave man, he took him for himself, gathering warriors for his army. But although victorious, the king's heart began to reveal signs of something more dangerous than external enemies: pride and imprudence. The time of mercy had been exhausted. The Lord remembered an ancient debt of a people who had extended their hand against the most fragile centuries before, when Israel was leaving Egypt. The Amalekites attacked the tired, the weak, the last of the people. It was a cowardly and cruel act. And now God, the just judge, determined the fulfillment of his sentence. Samuel was sent with a solemn mission. He approached Saul with words that carried the weight of heaven. "The Lord sent me to anoint you as king over Israel. Hear, then, now the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel. Go, then, now, and strike Amalek and destroy totally everything he has. Do not spare anything. Kill men, women, children, infants, oxen, sheep, camels, and donkeys." It was a harsh order, but it was not cruelty. It was divine justice against an impious and obstinate nation. Saul obeyed in part. He convened the people, gathered 200,000 infantry soldiers and 10,000 men of Judah, went down to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the valley. He warned the Canaanites, allies of Israel, so that they would separate from the Amalekites and not be destroyed with them. And the Lord gave the victory. Amalek was defeated, but Saul spared King Agag, and together with the people preserved the best of the sheep, oxen, fat animals, and everything that was good. Only what was despicable and weak was destroyed. That half-obedience was, in the eyes of God, disguised rebellion. That same night, the Lord spoke with Samuel. "I regret having made Saul king, because he has ceased to follow me and has not executed my words." Samuel was deeply anguished, cried to the Lord all that night. At dawn, he went to meet Saul, but Saul had left Gilgal, gone to Carmel, and raised for himself a monument, as if the victory were his, as if the obedience had been complete. When Samuel arrived, Saul greeted him with a hypocritical smile. "Blessed be you of the Lord. I have fulfilled the word of the Lord." But Samuel did not let himself be deceived. "Then, what bleating of sheep is this that I hear? and the lowing of oxen. Saul tried to justify. The people brought the best of the animals to sacrifice to the Lord thy God, but the rest we destroyed completely. Samuel interrupted. Wait, and I will declare to you what the Lord told me this night. When you were small in your own eyes, were you not made head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king. And now, why did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Saul insisted. But I obeyed. I brought Agag, the king, and destroyed everything, except the best animals to sacrifice to the Lord. It was then that Samuel pronounced one of the most powerful declarations in the history of Israel. Has the Lord as much pleasure in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying his voice? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken better than the fat of rams, because rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft and stubbornness as idolatry. Inasmuch as you have rejected the word of the Lord, he also has rejected you from being king. Saul then came to his senses, but too late. I have sinned, said he. I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord, because I feared the people and heeded their voice. Forgive, I pray thee. Samuel turned to leave, but Saul held his cape with force. The mantle tore. Samuel looked into the king's eyes and declared, Today the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you and has given it to your neighbor, better than you. Even so, Saul implored, honor me now before the elders and the people. Samuel consented out of mercy and returned with him. But before leaving, he did what Saul had refused to do. He ordered Agag to be brought. The Amalekite king was coming smiling, thinking that his life had been spared. But Samuel declared, As your sword made women childless, so your mother will be childless among women. And Samuel hacked Agag to pieces before the Lord. After that, Samuel returned to Ramah and Saul to his house in Gibeah. Never again did Samuel see Saul until the day of his death. But he wept for him, and the Lord regretted having made Saul king over Israel. The throne of Israel was still occupied, but heaven had already turned the page. Saul continued in power, but the Spirit of the Lord was no longer with him. And while the rejected king plunged ever deeper into disobedience, God had already chosen the next king, someone unknown to men, but intimate to the heart of God. Samuel, the prophet, was plunged in mourning. He wept for Saul, lamented the end of the promise that seemed bright. But the Lord spoke with firmness. How long will you have pity on Saul, having I rejected him, so that he does not reign over Israel? Fill your flask with oil and come. I will send you to Jesse, the Bethlehemite, because among his sons I have provided for myself a king. Samuel feared. Saul was still king and dangerous. How will I go? If Saul knows, he will kill me. The Lord answered with wisdom. Take with you a heifer and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. You will invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you must do. You will anoint the one I tell you. The prophet obeyed. He went to Bethlehem, a humble city, but which carried in its bosom the next chapter of the messianic history. When he arrived, the elders of the city trembled. Do you come in peace? In peace, answered Samuel. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. Jesse and his sons were called, and there before Samuel passed the first candidates to the throne. When Samuel saw Eliab, the firstborn, tall and imposing, he thought, certainly the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord cut that expectation with an eternal lesson. Do not look at his appearance, nor at the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. The Lord does not see as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. One by one, Jesse's sons passed, Abinadab, Shammah, 7 in total. But the Lord said of all of them, I have chosen none of these. Samuel looked at Jesse confused. Are your sons all here? Jesse answered almost like someone who did not consider it important. The youngest remains. He is tending the sheep. Send and call him. We will not sit at the table until he comes. And then they brought David. He entered young, ruddy, with beautiful eyes and good appearance. But what Samuel saw there went beyond the appearance. The Lord spoke, Arise and anoint him, for this is he. Before his brothers, before the people, Samuel poured the oil on David's head, and the Spirit of the Lord took possession of him from that day forward. But it was a secret. David was anointed, but not enthroned. He returned to the sheep. He would learn in the field what he would need on the throne. Meanwhile, the Spirit of the Lord withdrew from Saul, and an evil spirit permitted by God tormented him. Saul sank into anguish, into imbalance, into shadows. His servants noticed, Behold, an evil spirit from God torments you. Seek, then, a man who knows how to play the harp. When that spirit comes upon you, he will play, and you will feel better. Saul agreed. A servant suggested, I know a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite. He knows how to play the harp, is brave, a man of war, prudent in words of good appearance, and the Lord is with him. And thus David was called to the palace, brought with him a gift, bread, a skin of wine, and a kid. When Saul saw him, he loved him and made him his armor-bearer. He asked Jesse to let him serve the king permanently. And whenever the evil spirit struck Saul, David would take his harp and play with his hands. The music flowed. The environment changed. Saul was relieved. The evil spirit withdrew. Little did everyone know that the true king of Israel already played inside the palace. Not with a sword, but with strings. Not with armies, but with the presence of the Lord. The hills of Elah echoed the sounds of war. On one side, the Philistines. On the other, Israel. Both positioned on opposite hills, with a valley between them, as if the destiny of two nations was about to be decided there between stone and dust. But the Philistines had a terrifying weapon, a champion named Goliath, coming from Gath, a giant almost 3 meters tall, covered in bronze from head to toe. The breastplate weighed more than 50 kilograms. The spear in his hand was like a weaver's beam with an iron tip that alone weighed almost 7 kilograms. An armor-bearer went before him for 40 days, morning and evening. He would descend to the valley and cast his challenge. Why have you come out to set the battle in array? Am I not a Philistine? And you servants of Saul, choose from among you a man who comes to me. If he can fight with me and strike me, we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him, then you will be our servants. Today I challenge the ranks of Israel. Give me a man so that we may fight. Fear consumed Israel. Saul, the warrior king, remained silent. No man dared to take a step. The shame grew like a shadow in the camp. But meanwhile, in Bethlehem, a youth tended sheep. His name was David, sent by his father, Jesse. He left the flock under the care of a keeper and went to the battlefield to take supplies for his brothers and news home. Upon arriving, David saw the giant make the same insolent challenge. But, unlike the others, David did not cower. Upon hearing the blasphemous tone of Goliath, He was indignant. Who is, then, this uncircumcised Philistine to defy the armies of the living God? The soldiers mocked. His own brothers rebuked him. Why did you come here? With whom did you leave those few sheep? I know your presumption, Shuksi. But David answered with firmness, Is there not a cause? The youth's boldness soon reached the ears of Saul. The king ordered him to be called. David entered with simplicity, but filled with the Spirit. Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight against this Philistine. Saul looked at the lad, perhaps puny, inexperienced in war, and tried to dissuade him. You cannot fight against him. You are a youth, and he a warrior from his youth. But David spoke with conviction. When I tended the flock, a lion came, a bear came and took a sheep. I pursued them, struck them and delivered the sheep from its mouth. If the lion or the bear rose against me, I would grab them by the beard and kill them. The Lord who delivered me from the paws of the lion and the bear will deliver me from this Philistine. Convinced, Saul said, Go and the Lord be with you. They tried to put the king's armor on David, but it was heavy, strange. It was not with that he fought. He took everything off, took only his shepherd's staff, 5 smooth stones from the brook, his sling and the unshakable trust in the God of Israel, and then he went down to the valley. Goliath saw David approach and mocked. Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? Come to me and I will give your flesh to the birds of the heaven and the beasts of the field. But David, without fear, answered with eternal words. You come to me with a sword, a spear and a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will deliver you into my hand. I will strike you, take off your head, and the bodies of your army I will give to the birds and the animals, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And without waiting, David ran towards the giant, took a stone, placed it in the sling, spun and released. The stone flew accurately and struck Goliath's forehead. The giant fell on his face to the earth. The entire army saw. David ran, took the sword of Goliath himself, beheaded him and raised his head. The silence turned into terror. The Philistines fled. Israel and Judah shouted and pursued them all the way to the gates of Ekron. It was a great victory, and David returned with Goliath's head in his hands as a symbol that God does not need swords. Only faith, Saul asked. Whose son is this youth? And the commander Abner answered, As your soul lives, O king. I do not know. When Saul said, Inquire whose son he is. And when David presented himself, he answered with humility, I am the son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite. On that day, David's name echoed among the armies, but the Lord already knew him before the foundation of the world. After the victory, Saul called David into his presence. The king was curious, impressed, disconcerted. There before the throne, something extraordinary happened. Jonathan, the son of Saul, prince of Israel, looked at David and recognized something greater than military skill. He saw in David a heart similar to his, courageous, loyal, full of faith. The soul of Jonathan was tied to that of David as brothers of soul, and there was born one of the deepest friendships of biblical history. Jonathan took off his own royal robe, the armor, the belt, the bow, the sword, and gave them to David. It was more than a gift. It was honor. It was covenant. Jonathan, the heir to the throne, recognized that God was with David. From that day forward, Saul did not permit David to return to his father's house. Now, he was part of the palace, the army, the court, and wherever he went. David acted with wisdom. Saul placed him over the men of war, and all the people loved him, including the king's servants. But David's popularity grew, and with it envy was born. When the soldiers returned from war, the women came out from all the cities of Israel with dances and songs to celebrate the heroes. They played drums and instruments of joy and sang, "Saul has struck his thousands, but David his 10,000s." The words struck Saul's heart like arrows. The king was enraged and said to himself, "To David they have given 10,000s, and to me thousands. He only lacks the kingdom." And from that day forward, Saul began to look at David with suspicion. The next day, the evil spirit, the one that already tormented him since the Spirit of the Lord had withdrawn, returned with strength. Saul was with the spear in his hand. David played his harp as usual. Suddenly, Saul cast the spear against him, saying, "I will pin David to the wall." But David dodged twice. Saul began to fear him because he saw that the Lord was with David, but had withdrawn from him. Then he removed him from himself, naming him commander of 1,000 men. It was an attempt to place him far away, perhaps even dead in battle. But the more he tried to remove him, the more God exalted him. David went out and in with wisdom, and the people loved him more and more. Then Saul schemed a new plan, offered David one of his daughters as wife, Merab, on one condition: be a man of valor and fight the wars of the Lord. But in his heart Saul schemed, "Let not my hand be against him, but that of the Philistines." When the time came, Saul gave Merab to another man. But then he learned that his daughter Michal loved David, and this seemed convenient to him. He thought, "With her the bond will be stronger, and the Philistines will kill him." He called David and proposed the marriage. David, humble, answered, "Am I a man of valor? And who am I to be son-in-law to the king?" Then Saul proposed a war dowry, 100 foreskins of Philistines, a lethal challenge. David accepted and did not bring 100. He brought 200. Saul's plan failed once again. Michal became David's wife, and the king feared him even more. He saw that the Lord was with him. He saw that his own children loved David, and everyone in Israel and Judah recognized that David grew in honor and wisdom before God and before men. But in Saul's heart, the darkness deepened. The jealousy turned into obsession, and the admiration into mortal hatred. And then Saul gave a cold and direct order to Jonathan and to all his servants: "Kill David." But there was something Saul did not expect. His own son Jonathan had become David's greatest ally. Upon hearing the plan, Jonathan ran to his friend, warned him with urgency, "My father seeks to kill you. Be careful in the morning. Hide yourself in secret." He promised to intercede for him, and thus he did. The next day, Jonathan went to the father and spoke in favor of David with courage and wisdom. "Let not the king sin against his servant David. He has not sinned against you. Instead, his deeds have been very useful to you. He risked his life to kill the Philistine, and the Lord brought great deliverance to Israel. You yourself saw it and rejoiced. Why then would you sin by shedding innocent blood without cause?" And for a moment, Saul listened, swore before his son, "As surely as the Lord lives, he will not die." Jonathan ran to David and told everything. He brought him back into the presence of the king. And for a time, David returned to serve in the palace as before. But the peace would not last. Once again, the evil spirit struck Saul. He was at home with the spear in his hand. David played the harp. The scene was the same as before, but now Saul's hatred overflowed once and for all. He cast the spear against David, trying to pin him to the wall. But David dodged and fled that same night. He went to his house, where Michal, his wife and daughter of Saul, waited for him, and she realized the danger. If this night you do not save your life, tomorrow you will be dead. With love and boldness, Michal helped him escape through the window. Meanwhile, she prepared a trap, took a statue, laid it in the bed, covered it with a blanket, and placed a pillow of goat hair at its head, simulating that David was there sick. Soon after, Saul sent messengers to arrest David. Michal said, "He is sick." But Saul ordered, "Bring him to me in his bed so that I may kill him." When they entered and saw the farce, everything was discovered. Saul confronted his daughter. "Why have you deceived me so? Why have you let my enemy escape?" Michal answered, protecting David. "He said to me, 'Let me go, or else I will kill you.'" Meanwhile, David fled to Ramah, where Samuel, the prophet, was. He told him everything Saul had done, and both took refuge in Naioth. But Saul did not give up. He knew where David was and sent messengers to arrest him. However, when the men arrived, they saw a group of prophets prophesying and Samuel at their head. The Spirit of God came upon the soldiers, and they also began to prophesy. Saul sent a second group. The same happened. Then a third. The Spirit of God dominated them also. Finally, Saul went personally to Naioth, but before even arriving, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him also. He began to prophesy on the way, taken by a supernatural force. When he arrived in Naioth, he took off his clothes and prophesied before Samuel, fallen to the ground the whole day and all that night. And thus, the king who wanted to kill was humiliated by the God who delivers. People asked, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" But the deliverance was not confusion. It was divine intervention. God was with David, and no one, not even a king, could frustrate the plans of the Most High. David knew that protection would not last forever. The king was determined to kill him, and at any moment he could try again. Desperate, David fled from Naioth in Ramah and went straight to the only heart in Israel, in which he still trusted fully, Jonathan. Upon finding him, David poured out his heart. "What have I done? What is my guilt? What have I done against your father that he seeks my life?" Jonathan tried to deny it. "This will never happen to you. My father does nothing, whether great or small, without first warning me. Why then would he hide this from me?" But David knew. He knew that Saul no longer reasoned with logic and did not even trust his own son anymore. As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, there is only one step between me and death. Jonathan, loyal to the end, answered, "Everything that you desire, I will do for you." Then David devised a plan. "Tomorrow is the feast of the new moon, when I should be at the king's table, but I will be absent. And if your father asks for me, say that I asked to go to Bethlehem to sacrifice with my family. If he accepts well, I am safe. But if he becomes enraged, then you will know that his wickedness is definitive." Jonathan agreed, and both sealed a pact deeper than words, a pact of alliance between friends sealed in the presence of God. "If there is guilt in me, kill me yourself," said David. But Jonathan answered with firmness, "Far be it from you such a thing. If I know that my father plans evil against you, I myself will tell you." Jonathan then promised, "May the Lord be between me and you, and between my offspring and yours forever." The next morning, the plan went into action. David hid in the field. During the banquet of the new moon, David's place was empty on the first day. Saul said nothing. Perhaps he thought David was ceremonially unclean. But on the second day, his patience exploded. "Why did the son of Jesse not come to the supper, neither yesterday nor today?" Jonathan answered as agreed. David asked for permission to go to Bethlehem, where his family celebrates the annual sacrifice. But Saul was enraged against his own son. "Son of a perverse and rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your shame? As long as he lives, you will not be firm, nor your kingdom. Send and call him, for he will certainly die." Jonathan stood up in defense. "Why should he die? What has he done?" And then Saul threw a spear at him. His own son, dominated by blind hatred. Jonathan withdrew from the table in deep anger and fasted on that day, saddened because of David and to see his father's shame. The next day, Jonathan went to the field, as they had agreed. He carried with him a boy and a bow with arrows. He said to the young man, "Run, look for the arrows that I shoot." He shot an arrow beyond the place where the boy should go. That was the sign. Then he shouted, "Is the arrow not further beyond you? Hurry, do not delay." The boy picked up the arrows and returned without knowing anything. But David understood. After the young man left, David came out of hiding. The two friends looked at each other one last time, and there in the middle of the field, they wept together. David wept more. Jonathan said, "Go in peace. We have both sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord will be between me and you, and between my offspring and yours forever.'" And thus the prince and the anointed of God said goodbye. One would depart for the desert, the other to the palace of a father dominated by darkness. But their friendship would echo eternally as an example of loyalty, brotherly love, and faith in the God who unites hearts. David was fleeing, no longer as an acclaimed warrior, nor as a national hero, but as a man marked to die, target of the insane fury of the king he had served faithfully. With a tightened heart and a tired body, he fled to the city of Nob, where the priests were, and went to meet Ahimelech, the high priest. Ahimelech trembled to see him arrive alone. "Why do you come alone and no one with you?" he asked suspiciously. David, fearing that the truth would put lives at risk, hid his real motive. He invented a mission. "The king gave me a secret order, and I sent my men to an appointed place. I came in a hurry. Now what do you have at hand? Give me 5 loaves or whatever is found." Ahimelech answered that there was no common bread, only the sacred bread of the presence, which could only be eaten by priests, unless the men were ceremonially pure. David guaranteed, "No woman has been with us lately. We are pure." Then Ahimelech handed him the sacred loaves just exchanged before the Lord. It was bread from the sanctuary reserved for God, but now serving as sustenance to the anointed in flight, a sign that the Lord cares for his own, even when all paths close. But David wanted more than bread. He knew that soon he would need to defend himself. "Do you not have here at hand some spear or sword? Because I did not bring neither sword, nor any weapon with me, for the king's mission was urgent." And Ahimelech revealed something extraordinary. "The sword of Goliath, the Philistine whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod." It was the sword that one day symbolized terror. Now it was the reminder of God's victory, David answered. "There is no other like it. give it to me." He who had brought down a giant with a stone now wielded the sword of the enemy himself. But there was an eye observing everything. A man named Doeg, the Edomite, servant of Saul, was there, silent but dangerous. His words would be poison later. Feeling the siege tighten, David fled again, this time to Gath, land of the Philistines, historic enemies of Israel, and native land of Goliath, a strange refuge. But David was without options. He presented himself to King Achish, but soon the king's servants recognized him. "Is this not David, the king of the land? Did they not sing about him? Saul has struck his thousands and David his 10,000s. David felt fear. He was in enemy territory, surrounded by those who knew his fame and his sword. Then, to protect himself, David used cunning. He pretended to be mad before them. He scribbled on the doors, let saliva flow down his beard, behaving like an insane person. Achish looked at the scene and said, "Are they bringing madmen to me now? Why bring this one into my presence?" And they let him go. David, the anointed of the Lord, had eaten sacred bread and wielded the sword of a giant. But now he drooled before foreigners to survive. The man, according to the heart of God, was being broken, hidden, humiliated, but not forgotten. Every step, every flight, every detail was part of the divine forge that would prepare a shepherd to become king. David fled to the cave of Adullam. There was no throne, no palace, no crowds cheering, only the loneliness of the hiding place, the cold of the stone, and the echo of a heart that still believed in the promises of God, even when everything around him screamed the opposite. But he would not stay alone for long. The news spread like fire on the hills. The anointed of God was hidden, a fugitive, rejected by the king. And then began to arrive not the nobles, nor the powerful, but the broken ones. Came all those who were in distress, indebted and afflicted in spirit, and found in David not just a leader, but a refuge. And there, in that unlikely place, an army of 400 men was formed. They did not come with sharpened swords, but with broken hearts, and David became their captain. Among those who arrived was also his family, Jesse, his brothers, the same ones who before had ignored him, now sought him for shelter. Exile united what pride had separated, but David knew that the cave could not protect them forever. Then he took his parents to the king of Moab, on the other side of the Jordan, and asked, "Permit that my father and my mother stay with you until I know what God will do with me." And there they stayed in safety. Meanwhile, the prophet Gad appeared with a clear message. "Do not stay in this strong place. Go and enter the land of Judah." David obeyed, left the hiding place and went to the forest of Hereth, even pursued. He did not flee from his calling. He remained in the land that God had promised him, but in another place. In Gibeah, Saul was enraged, sitting under a tamarisk, spear in hand, symbol of his instability. He surrounded himself with his servants with a suspicious look and a soul consumed by paranoia. "Here, Benjamites, do you think the son of Jesse will give you fields and vineyards? All of you conspire against me. None of you warned me that my son made a covenant with him." And then Doeg, the Edomite, the one who had been in Nob when David passed through there, broke the silence. "I saw the son of Jesse come to Ahimelech, son of Ahitub. He consulted the Lord for him, gave him provisions and gave him the sword of Goliath. It was all Saul needed to hear to plunge even deeper into madness. He ordered Ahimelech and all the priests of Nob to be called. They came without knowing what awaited them. "Why have you conspired against me?" roared Saul. "You gave bread and sword to my enemy and consulted God for him." "Shteitai," Ahimelech answered with integrity. "Who is there among all your servants as faithful as David? He is son-in-law to the king, commander of your guard, honored in your house. Did I do this today for the first time? No, do not let the king put blame on his servant." But Saul, deaf to reason, decreed the death of the priests of the Lord. His servants refused to raise their hand against the anointed of God. But Doeg, the Edomite, obeyed. And on that day, Doeg killed 85 priests, men who wore the linen ephod. But he did not stop there. He destroyed the city of Nob, put to the sword men, women, children, babies, oxen, donkeys, and sheep. A holy carnage, committed by order of a king who had lost all fear of God. But one escaped, Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, fled to David. He told everything that had happened, and when David heard, his heart tore. I knew on that day that Doeg, the Edomite, being there, would not stay silent. I caused the death of all the house of your father. But then David did something that would echo for generations. He extended shelter to Abiathar. "Stay with me, do not fear, because he who seeks my life will also seek yours. You will be safe with me." Even in flight, even without a crown, David became a shepherd of men. And where the world saw a fugitive, God saw a king being molded in the desert. The desert molded David's character, and with each step, his trust stopped being in the sword and became firmly rooted in the direction of God. While Saul consumed his energy in paranoia, David became a warrior obedient to the voice of the Most High. Then reached him an urgent piece of news. The Philistines are attacking Keilah and plundering the wheat fields. Keilah was an Israelite city surrounded by walls and gates. And the Philistines, taking advantage of the fragility of the national leadership, plundered at will. It was an opportunity to hide, to omit himself. But David was not that kind of man. He consulted the Lord. "Shall I go and strike these Philistines?" And the Lord answered, "Go and strike the Philistines and deliver Keilah." But his men hesitated. They were in Judah, already surrounded by dangers. Facing the Philistines now seemed like suicide. David then consulted the Lord again, and once more the answer came clear. "Arise, go down to Keilah, for I give the Philistines into your hands." David departed with his men, attacked the invaders, and delivered the city, but not everyone celebrated. When Saul learned that David was in Keilah, he rejoiced perversely. "God has delivered him into my hands." He entered a city with doors and bars. Now he is trapped. Saul gathered the people to go down to Keilah and surround David. But David learned of the plan. He called Abiathar, the priest, and asked him to bring the ephod, the sacred instrument of consultation, to God. He prayed with fear and faith. "Lord God of Israel, Saul plans to come to Keilah to destroy me. Will he deliver the men of Keilah into my hands, into his hands? And will Saul come, as I heard say?" And the Lord answered, "Saul will come." And David asked, "And will the men of Keilah deliver me into his hands?" God said, "They will deliver." David understood. Even after delivering the city, the people would betray him for fear of Saul, without bitterness. without judgment. David departed with his 600 men, walking from city to city like nomads guided by faith. Saul sought him every day, but God did not deliver him. David took refuge in the arid places, in the mountains, and in the deserts of Ziph. He was surrounded, yes, but surrounded by promises greater than spears. And it was in that dark moment that Jonathan appeared again. The son of the king went up to David in Horesh and strengthened his hands in God. He said, "Do not fear, the hand of my father Saul will not find you. You will reign over Israel, and I will be second with you. Even my father knows that." Both renewed their covenant before the Lord. It was the last time they would meet. But the persecution continued. The Ziphites, inhabitants of the region, went to Saul in Gibeah. They betrayed David. "Is not David hidden among us in the strongholds of Hersa, in the mountains of Hachilah?" Saul blessed them for their compassion and promised to go down, but ordered them to investigate well. For David was as cunning as a serpent. When David learned of the betrayal, he went down to the rocks in the desert of Maon. Saul followed him with his army. The persecution tightened. Saul was on one side of the mountain, David on the other, and they began to surround him. It was the end, or so it seemed. But then a messenger ran to Saul with new news. "Hurry, the Philistines have invaded the land." And Saul retreated. David was spared at the last instant. The place where he was called Selahammalakoth, Rock of Escape. From there, David went up to inhabit the strongholds of Engedi, where the rock, the water, and the silence would be his shelter for now. As soon as Saul returned from facing the Philistines, they told him, "Behold, David is in the desert of Engedi." And once again Saul gathered his soldiers. 3,000 chosen men of the elite of Israel went up the crags of the mountain goats in search of just one man. 3,000 against one. During the journey, Saul entered alone into one of the caves to relieve his body. It was a dark, silent cave, the same one where David and his men were hidden in the back. David's soldiers whispered with eyes shining with expectation, "This is the day of which the Lord said to you, 'Behold, I deliver your enemy into your hands. Now kill him.'" David approached silently, like a shadow. Saul, unprotected, vulnerable, was centimeters from David's sword. The throne seemed finally within his reach. But David did not raise his hand against the anointed of the Lord. Instead, he cut only the skirt of Saul's mantle, but even that weighed in his heart. Even the small gesture of touching the symbol of Saul's authority caused him pain. Then David turned to his men and restrained them with firmness. "The Lord keep me from doing such a thing to my Lord, the anointed of the Lord, by extending my hand against him, because he is the anointed of the Lord." Saul left the cave without knowing how close he came to death. And then David left after him and called him with a loud voice, "My Lord, King." Saul turned, and David bowed with his face to the earth in an act of honor and reverence. With his heart burning, he spoke, "Why do you listen to those who say, 'David seeks your harm'? Today your eyes saw how the Lord delivered you into my hands in this cave. Some told me to kill you, but I spared you and said, 'I will not extend my hand against my Lord, for he is the anointed of the Lord.'" Then he raised the piece of the mantle he had cut. "Look, do you see here the skirt of your mantle in my hand? I cut it and did not kill you, no. Then that there is no evil nor rebellion in me. I have not sinned against you, but you hunt for my life to take it." And then David cried out, "The Lord judge between me and you, and the Lord avenge me of you. However, my hand will not be against you. Out of the wicked proceeds wickedness. but my hand will not be against you." David did not ask for vengeance. He asked for justice, not to the sword, but to God. "Whom do you pursue, King of Israel? A dead dog, a flea," and concluded with reverence. "The Lord, however, be judge and judge between me and you. May he see and advocate my cause and deliver me from your hand." Saul listened in silence and then began to weep. "You are more righteous than I," said he. "You rewarded me with good, and I repaid you with evil. Today you showed how you treated me well when the Lord delivered me into your hands, and you did not kill me. Who finds his enemy and lets him go in peace, may the Lord reward you." And then Saul prophesied something that he himself feared. "Now I know that you will certainly reign and that the kingdom of Israel will be firm in your hand." Then he asked, "Swear to me by the Lord that you will not destroy my offspring, nor wipe out my name from my father's house." And David swore. Saul returned to his way, and David returned to the hiding places. The throne was not yet his, but David's heart was already ready for it. After that, something sad happens. The prophet Samuel died, the prophet who had anointed kings, confronted empires, and guided Israel with fear of God. Now he rested. All the people gathered to mourn him. They wept not just for his life, but for the end of an era. Samuel was buried in his house in Ramah, and David followed to the desert of Paran. And there, in the midst of the heat and the dust, arose a new test. Not against giants, not against armies, but against David's own soul. There was a very rich man in Maon. His name was Nabal. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and at that time he was shearing his flock in Carmel. He was rude, evil in his actions, descendant of Caleb. His name meant foolish, and he lived up to the name. But his wife was Abigail, beautiful, prudent, sensible, a woman whose spirit shone where the husband only brought darkness. David, upon hearing that Nabal was shearing his sheep, time of feast and plenty, sent 10 young men with words of peace. "Greet him in my name. Tell him, 'Peace be to you, to your house and to everything that you have.' Explain that, while his shepherds were in the desert, we never molested them. No good was lacking to them. Now I ask only what moves your heart. Any gift that you have for your servants and for your son David." It was a just request, a gesture of honor. But Nabal answered with arrogance, "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? Today, many servants flee from their masters. Would I take my bread, my water, and the meat of my shearers to give to men who I do not know where they come from?" The messengers returned and told everything to David, and David was enraged. This was not the giant Goliath, but it was an affront that David was not willing to ignore. He ordered his sword. 400 men went down with him. David was determined. That night, Nabal would die, but God was already acting. One of the servants ran to Abigail and told everything. He said, "David sent messengers with gentle words, but Nabal insulted them. Nevertheless, David's men were good to us, protected us like a wall. Now think you what to do, for evil is already determined against all this house." Abigail did not lose time. Without telling her husband, she prepared a generous offering: 200 loaves, 2 skins of wine, 5 prepared sheep, toasted grains, cakes of raisins and figs. She placed everything on donkeys and departed to meet David. On the way, while David and his men advanced, she met him, got off the donkey, and prostrated herself with her face to the earth. With soft words and filled with wisdom, Abigail intercepted the fury of a king in formation. "My lord, upon me be the guilt. Do not look at this man of Belial, Nabal, because according to his name, so is he foolish. The Lord has kept you from shedding blood and from avenging yourself by your own hand. When you are king, you will not carry this weight of conscience for having killed without cause. And when the Lord does all the good he promised to you, remember your servant." David stopped. His heavy breathing began to calm down, and he saw God had just delivered him from himself. "Blessed be the Lord, God of Israel, who today sent you to meet me. Blessed be your wisdom, and blessed be yourself, who prevented me from shedding blood. If you had not come, none of the male sex of Nabal would have remained until dawn." David accepted the gifts and dismissed Abigail with honor. The next morning, Abigail returned home. Nabal was drunk, feasting like a king. She told him nothing until the wine went out of him. Then she told everything, and when he heard, his heart stopped. His body became like stone. 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. Upon hearing the news, David recognized the divine justice. "Blessed be the Lord who pleaded my cause." Wanimo. And then David sent to tell Abigail that he wished to take her as his wife. She prostrated herself and answered, "Here is your servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord." And thus the sensible woman became the wife of the future king. Meanwhile, Saul gave Michal, the daughter who before had been David's wife, to another man. But the Lord continued writing a story of justice, mercy, and purpose. The sun still burned the desert of Zuph when the Ziphites went to Saul for the second time and said, "David is hidden in the mount of Hachilah," in front of Jeshimon. It was as if history was repeating itself. Once again, the fallen king stood up to hunt the man anointed by God. Saul gathered 3,000 chosen men of Israel, the best soldiers, and went down to the desert of Ziph, armed with his spear and his thirst for vengeance. David, who now had eyes everywhere, learned of the movement, sent spies, confirmed that Saul had indeed come and went to where the camp was. Night had fallen. Saul's army slept in a circle. In the center was the king with his spear stuck in the ground beside his head, and Abner, the commander of his army, sleeping beside him. David observed from afar. His heart stirred, but he did not trust his own impulses. He consulted God. He called 2 men. One of them was Abishai, brother of Joab. David asked, "Who will go down with me to Saul to the camp?" "I will go with you," answered Abishai, and together the 2 went down in the dead of night. They passed through among the sleeping soldiers and reached the heart of the camp without being noticed. The Bible says that a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon all of them. There was Saul, vulnerable, motionless, his spear stuck in the ground. Abishai whispered, "Today God delivered your enemy into your hands. Let me now pin him to the earth with the spear with one blow. I will not repeat it." The opportunity was perfect, silent, deadly. But David answered with firmness, "Do not kill him, for who can extend his hand against the anointed of the Lord and remain innocent? As the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him, or his day to die will arrive, or he will fall in battle. But I will not extend my hand against the anointed of the Lord." David did not want to take the throne by violence. He preferred to trust in God's time, even if it cost suffering. Then he and Abishai took Saul's spear and the jar of water that was beside his head and went away. No one saw. No one woke up. When they were in a safe place, David went up to the top of a mountain at a distance and shouted towards the camp, "Abner, Are you not going to answer, Abner?" The commander woke up frightened. "Who are you who calls to the king?" David answered with boldness. "Are you not a man? Who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not guarded your Lord, the king? Look to your side. Where is the king's spear and the jar of water?" The camp woke up. Saul recognized the voice. "Is this your voice, my son David?" And David answered, "It is mine, my lord. O king, why do you pursue me? What have I done? What is my guilt? If the Lord incited you against me, let him accept an offering. But if they are men who instigate you, cursed be they before the Lord. You drive me out as if I did not belong to Israel, as if you said, 'Go, serve other gods.' Do not let my blood fall to the earth far from the Lord." David did not see Saul just as a king, but as someone whom he still wanted to restore the conscience. Saul once again broke before the words of the man who could have killed him. "I have sinned. Return, my son David. I will do you no more harm. For today my life was precious in your eyes. You acted with justice, and I acted like a fool." King David answered, "Here is the king's spear. Let one of the lads come and take it. The Lord will reward each one according to his justice and faithfulness. He delivered you today into my hands. But I did not extend my hand against his anointed. As today your life was precious in my eyes, so may my life be precious in the eyes of the Lord, and may he deliver me from all anguish." And then Saul said, "Blessed are you, my son David. You will do great things and will prevail." And Saul returned to his way, and David also followed to his. There was no reconciliation. The wound was too deep, but there was honor. There was mercy, and there was the certainty that the throne of Israel would never be taken by force, but by faithfulness to the will of God. David had spared Saul twice. He had proven his innocence, his loyalty, his integrity. But, despite that, he knew Saul's heart had not changed. The desert molded faith, but also wore down hope. And thus, the anointed of God, the warrior of the Psalms, the shepherd of promises, gave in to fear. He said to himself, "Now I will perish someday by the hand of Saul. It will be better that I flee to the land of the Philistines, and Saul will give up looking for me. Thus I will escape his hand." It was a difficult, human, real decision. David was tired of fleeing, of looking over his shoulder, of living among rocks and caves. He did not doubt God, but he doubted God's timing, and thus David stood up with his men, now 600, and crossed to the other side, to the land of the Philistines, historic enemies of Israel. He took with him his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, widow of Nabal. Together they went to Achish, king of Gath. Yes, the city of Goliath. And surprisingly, Achish received him. After all, David's name was feared even among the Philistines. And now the same warrior who had defeated his champions asked for refuge as an exile. David and his men settled in Gath for some time, but it was not a place for Israelites to live. Then David made a request to the king. "If I have found grace in your eyes, give me one of the interior cities so that I may dwell there. It is not fitting that I dwell with you in the royal city." Achish granted the city of Ziklag, and from that day forward it began to belong to the kings of Judah. David remained there a year and 4 months, but he did not stand still. David made secret incursions against the Geshurites, Gezerites, and Amalekites, hostile peoples who inhabited the south and had been enemies of Israel since ancient times. With military precision, David attacked and left no survivors. He took the cattle, the goods, the clothes, and returned to Ziklag. When Achish asked, "Where did you make the incursion today?" David answered, "Against the south of Judah, or against the Canaanites or some other region of Israel." It was a survival strategy, but also a field of tension. David kept Achish deceived, making him think that he now was a traitor to his own nation, someone with no return to Israel, and thus Achish began to trust in David. "He has made himself odious to his people. Therefore he will be my servant forever." Achish's trust grew, but David's heart remained faithful to the God of Israel. However, the disguise had a price. David was among the enemies of the people of God, living as a foreigner, depending on the trust of a Philistine king, awaiting, until God opened the way. The clouds were closing over Israel. The Philistines once again gathered their armies for war, and this time marched against Saul. It was the final crisis. The king who before pursued David now saw the true enemy approaching with total strength. On the other side, Achish, the Philistine king, called David, his guest, his supposed ally, and said, "Well, you know that you will go with me to battle, you and your men." And David, with skill, answered, "Then you will know what your servant can do." Achish trusted blindly in David. So blind was he that he declared, "Therefore I will make you guard of my person forever." But while the war grew on the horizon, an older shadow rose in Saul's heart, the silence of God. Samuel had already died. All Israel wept for him, and Saul, in past times, had expelled the diviners and sorcerers from the land, obeying the law of Moses. But now the king was alone, without a prophet, without direction, without peace. When Saul saw the Philistine army camped in Shunem, his heart trembled strongly. He tried to consult the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him, neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. The heaven was silent, desperate. Saul broke his own decrees, called his servants and said, "Seek for me a woman who has a spirit of divination, so that I may go to her and consult her." And the servants said, "There is a woman in Endor who invokes the dead." Then Saul disguised himself, took off his royal robes, and went at night with 2 men there. The darkness of the journey reflected the darkness of the king's heart. Upon arriving, he said to the woman, "I ask that you divine for me by the Spirit, and make me come up to whom I tell you." But the woman suspiciously answered, "You well know what Saul did, how he expelled the diviners from the land. Why do you set a trap against me?" Saul swore by God, yes, the same God he had abandoned. "As surely as the Lord lives, no evil will come upon you for this." The woman asked, "Whom shall I make come up for you?" "Make Samuel come up for me." And then something unexpected and terrifying happened. When the woman saw Samuel, she screamed with a loud voice, "Why have you deceived me? Are you Saul?" The king said, "Do not fear. What do you see?" "I see gods coming up from the earth," she answered. "And what is his appearance?" "An elder is coming up and is wrapped in a mantle." It was Samuel. Saul bowed with his face to the earth and prostrated himself. Then, an evil spirit passing himself off, as Samuel spoke with a voice of condemnation. "Why have you disturbed me by making me come up?" Saul answered, "I am in great anguish. The Philistines fight against me. God has withdrawn from me. He does not answer me anymore. neither by prophets, nor by dreams. Therefore I called you, so that you may make me know what I should do." But Samuel answered, "Why then do you ask me, seeing that the Lord has withdrawn from you and has become your enemy? The Lord did as he spoke through me. He tore the kingdom from your hand and gave it to David, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord, nor executed his burning wrath against Amalek. Therefore, the Lord has done this to you today." And then came the final sentence, "Tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will deliver Israel into the hands of the Philistines." Upon hearing these words, Saul fell to the earth, taken by fear, weak, without strength, without bread, without peace, without God. The woman, seeing the king's state, insisted that he eat. Saul refused, but his servants and the woman convinced him. She quickly prepared a fattened calf, baked unleavened bread, and offered it to Saul. He ate and left that same night. The man who did not seek God when there was time now walked to his final destination in darkness. The armies were ready. The field of war was armed like a tragic theater about to unfold. The Philistines marched in battle order to Aphek, camping by the springs of Jezreel. The tension grew at every step. On the horizon, the hills of Gilboa, where Saul, the rejected king, prepared for his last combat. Among the Philistines marched a man who should not be there, David. With him, his 600 men, serving under Achish, king of Gath, the same David who had killed Goliath, the same David who was sung by Israel. Saul has struck his thousands, but David his 10,000s. I now allied with the Philistines, not by treason, but by survival. David had hidden himself among the enemies of Israel, and now seemed to be on a collision course with his own people. When the Philistine princes reviewed the troops, they recognized the Hebrews among them. Their eyes narrowed. Their words were as sharp as spears. "What are these Hebrews doing here? Who is this David? Is he not the servant of Saul, king of Israel? He has been with us for days or years, and we have not found fault in him." Tried to argue Achish, but the princes were categorical. "He will not go with us to battle in the war. He will turn against us to reconcile with Saul. What better way to gain the favor of his Lord than with the heads of our men?" It was reason, strategy, and divine protection. Then Achish called David and said with sincerity, "As surely as the Lord lives, you are upright in my eyes. From the day you came to me until today, I have found nothing wrong in you, but the princes do not want you. Return in peace. Do not do anything that displeases the princes." David, with his usual cunning, answered, "But what have I done? What have you found in me from the day I entered your service until today, that I may not go and fight against the enemies of the Lord?" "My lord," Achish replied, "I know that you are as good as an angel of God." But the princes said, "He will not go up with us to battle," and then ordered, "Arise in the morning with your servants. As soon as it dawns, depart." That night, David and his men prepared themselves. At the break of day, they returned to Ziklag, and the Philistines marched to Gilboa, where blood would be shed, where kings would fall, and where the purpose of God would advance, even in the darkest valley. David would not fight against Israel, because God was still his general. The day was born somber in Ziklag. David and his men, exhausted after the march from Aphek, approached the city where their families waited. They waited for reunions, rest, peace, but what they saw in the distance was smoke. Ziklag burned in flames. The Amalekites had attacked. They took advantage of the men's absence, invaded the city, plundered everything, and took captive the women, the sons, and the daughters. They killed no one, but took everything, everything. When David and his warriors arrived and saw what had happened, they raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. The pain was deep. The sound of anguish echoed through the ruins of the city. The children were gone. The wives disappeared. Even David's wives, Ahinoam and Abigail, were among the captives. And it was then that came the hardest blow. The men who followed David began to talk about stoning him. Those same ones who had been rescued by him in the cave of Adullam, who fought by his side, now saw him as responsible for the tragedy. The soul of each man was bitter because of his sons and daughters. David was completely alone. But then, in the darkest point of the night, when everything seemed lost, the text reveals to us the key to the turnaround. However, David strengthened himself in the Lord, his God. He did not seek vengeance, nor guilty ones, nor despair. He sought God, called Abiathar, the priest, and said, "Bring me here the ephod." And David consulted the Lord. "Shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them?" And the Lord answered, "Pursue, for you will certainly overtake and will deliver everything." Without hesitating, David departed with his 600 men, but on the way, 200 stayed behind, too exhausted to continue. David followed with the other 400. Then, in the desert, they found an Egyptian abandoned by the Amalekites. He was weak, sick, hungry. They gave him bread, water, figs, and raisins. When he recovered his strength, David asked him, "Whose are you? From where do you come?" The young man answered, "I am servant to an Amalekite. My masters left me because I became ill. We plundered the south of the Cherethites, of Judah and of Caleb, and burned Ziklag with fire." David asked, "Can you guide us to this troop?" "Yes," said he, "if you swear to me by the Lord that you will not kill me, nor deliver me into the hand of my master." And then the slave led them. David found the Amalekites spread out over the land, eating, drinking, and dancing with the spoil of Ziklag and of other lands that they had plundered. David attacked them by surprise. From the twilight of the evening until the night of the following day, he struck them. Only 400 young men escaped on camels, and thus David recovered everything that the Amalekites had taken. Nothing was lacking, neither sons, nor daughters, nor wives, nor goods. David delivered them all. He also took all the cattle and the flocks of the enemies. And the men said, "This is David's spoil." Upon returning, the 200 men who had stayed behind came to meet the army. But among David's soldiers, some perverse ones said, "These did not go to the battle. Let them take only their wives and children, nothing more." But David, with justice and mercy, answered, "Do not do so, my brothers, with what the Lord has given us. He has kept us and delivered the enemies into our hands. As would be the part of those who went down to the battle, so will be the part of those who stay with the baggage. They will share equally." And he made this a statute and ordinance in Israel until this day. Upon returning to Ziklag, David began to send gifts from the spoil to the elders of Judah, his friends, saying, "Behold here a gift for you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord." The blessing was shared. The victory was not just his, it was the Lord's. David had touched rock bottom, but there he discovered that his refuge, his strength, his honor, and his victory were in the Lord, his God. Meanwhile, The war was still armed against King Saul. There was no more flight nor negotiation. The Philistines marched against Israel, and Israel faced them on the mountains of Gilboa. The hills that before sheltered shepherds were now stained with blood. Saul's army, already weakened, demoralized and afraid, did not resist. The battle was hard, and the men of Israel fell before the Philistines. But the enemies had a target, the king. They reached Saul and his sons. One by one, the king's sons fell on the battlefield. Jonathan, David's loyal friend, Abinadab, Malchishua. Saul's heart must have bled more for the loss of his sons than for the physical wounds. But the Philistines surrounded him, and the archers struck him with strength. Gravely wounded, the king understood the end was inevitable. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through with it, so that these uncircumcised do not come and abuse me." But the armor-bearer did not want to. He was taken by terror. How to touch the anointed of the Lord? Before the silence and the refusal, Saul fell on his own sword. The armor-bearer, upon seeing that Saul was dead, also threw himself on his sword and died with him. And there, on Mount Gilboa, ended the reign of Saul. He, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men died together on that day. When the Israelites on the other side of the valley saw that the army had fled and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned the cities, and the Philistines took them. The next day, while the enemies plundered the bodies of the fallen, they found Saul and his sons dead. They beheaded Saul, took his weapons, sent them throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temples of their idols and among the people. They placed Saul's weapons in the temple of Ashtaroth and nailed his body to the wall of Beth-shan. The shame was complete. The first king of Israel, dead, mutilated, hung like a trophy for the pagan gods. But then something noble happened. The brave men of Jabesh Gilead, that people whom Saul one day had saved at the beginning of his reign, remembered him. They traveled at night, silent, courageous. They went down to Beth-shan, removed the bodies of Saul and of his sons from the wall, and took them to Jabesh. There they burned them in honor and buried their bones under a tamarisk in Jabesh. After that, they fasted 7 days. It was the mourning of a people for a king, not just for his tragic death, but for a story that began with promises and ended in a fall. The throne of Israel was empty, the people scattered, the army destroyed, the name of God mocked among the enemies. But even in the midst of the darkness, the purpose of God advanced. The man, according to the heart of God, still breathed. The shepherd of Bethlehem, the fugitive of the caves, the warrior of Ziklag, was about to assume the place that heaven had already prepared. If you followed until here, congratulations. You are a true winner. We arrived at the end of the 31 chapters of the first book of Samuel in order and sequence. Many begin, but few reach the end. You persevered, were edified, and now carry this message within you. Now I want to know who really reached here. Comment below. I went to the end of the video and was edified by the first book of Samuel. Thus everyone will know that you are part of those who did not give up and remained firm until the end of this powerful biblical journey. This video took a lot of work to be done. It was days of dedication, reading and production to bring this content in the most impactful way possible. So, do not forget to like and comment. This helps us to continue bringing more content like this. Your comment is very important, and your like too. Stay tuned to the channel so that you also watch the story of the second book of Samuel, which is the continuation of the history of Israel. And if this message spoke to your heart, do not keep it to yourself. Share it with more people and help the Word of God to reach even more lives. Together, we can carry this knowledge forward. And you who arrived here and still have not accepted Jesus as your Savior, know that there is still time. Bend your knees now. Humble yourself before God. Confess your sins and tell Him that you want to live a new life, obeying the Word of God. Jesus will hear you and will receive you with open arms. You only need to confess with faith and believe in His Word over your life. God bless.